Another marketing trend that's interesting, especially on the social side, and this has been talked in certain circles as well, is the concept of an intern, right? So interns are on the social media side of things they're oftentimes they aren't literally an intern. I think maybe like 10 years ago, the people who managed social channels were probably interns because, social was a lot smaller than it is today. But interns basically are the people or the team that manage these social channels for a product, project, brand, or whatever, and regarded more so in Web3 or crypto. But that concept of intern creates a different type of persona for that respective account, right? And that sort of gives them the space where even if it's in a brand account, that intern personality is able to sort of add this sense of humor to the content they might be putting out. Additionally, there are definitely a good number of projects or brands now that have an intern account associated with that brand itself. So as an example, Polymarket is a prediction market. They've gotten really popular. They actually recently announced that they raised $74.5 million, which is huge. They've recently part of their social strategy, and they just embraced it because I think the team has that personality, so they're able to lean into it more. They basically have a Polymarket intern who's like a separate account, but basically has claimed to be the Polymarket intern on the social side. And so they play around with each other and interact with each other in a way that is possible because of that type of persona and the characters that they sort of built around the brand account, but also the people who help manage or work as a part of the team on behalf of the brand account. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that could be.
Today, on this episode, I'll be hosting Thomas Pan. He is better known as T Pan. He began his career in growth and marketing at companies like Uber, and he has since transitioned into Web3 when he became fascinated with NFTs through NBA Top Shot in early 2021. T Pan is a prolific content creator. He is a consultant helping companies understand Web3 better, and he owns an amazing Substack newsletter called Web3 with T Pan. He's one of the leading minds on subjects like growth marketing in Web3. He's super knowledgeable, and it's a pleasure to have him on this episode to share his journey and insight into Web3 marketing strategies to scale growth. On episode 262 of your newsletter, you mentioned how someone purchased 9 million worth of meme tokens called WIF in 1 minute and how ReDAO capitalized on that trend, and you called it on-chain guerrilla marketing. Can you explain what on-chain guerrilla marketing is and how it works?
So there was a community or a project on Solana. They first observed something that happened on chain, and then they used a tactic. In this case, they purchased a domain name. They sent it to the owner of that wallet address and claimed it as their own. And naturally, as people made fun of the transaction and the owner or the person that made that transaction, which was at the time supposedly ReDAO, that brought a lot of attention to what they were doing. So it was on-chain in the way that I described it, right? There's an on-chain transaction. They were able to attribute it. They identified it. And it was guerrilla marketing in the sense that it was very growth hacky. It was sort of sneaky, and ultimately the cards were revealed in terms of how that was done. So really great example of what can be done in a creative and sort of growth hacky way. And the question there is, what else can be done on chain for growth hacky like tactics or strategies? Typically it's time sensitive, and also typically there needs to be a degree of thoughtfulness around it. And in this case, ReDAO was able to effectively, I don't know if it's the right way to describe this, it was sort of like a prank. It was a little performative in terms of what they did, but ultimately they transparently shared, hey, this is actually what happened. And what's really nice is they shared how they did it and explained that. So not only was it a fun meme or something that the community on Twitter and X really had a fun moment around, but they also were able to, and I think for certain folks, especially in marketing and growth, were able to think about, okay, this is actually really interesting. Like, how did they do this? Why did they do this? And how can I learn from that? So that's why I found it interesting and decided to sort of expand a little bit more upon that in a form of a sort of case study from my blog in that regard.
When I read the newsletter, I was like, on-chain guerrilla marketing. This is probably the first time I've heard about that, or I've seen that coined in that way. I've seen on-chain marketing, but on-chain guerrilla marketing just seemed very new. Are there any other case studies of brands that you know who have attempted something similar to what they did?
Yeah, I wouldn't say off the top of my head. I think there are definitely. I think a very
Yeah,
simple example and probably a little less interesting because it's less time sensitive and it's been
yeah,
done many times here and there is there have been in the past many different projects or companies who've done some form of like on-chain scavenger hunt, which is actually
yeah,
pretty interesting. Not exactly on-chain guerrilla marketing, but I think there's aspects of on-chain and off-chain combined, and I participated in it, so I definitely can, um, you know, I've experienced it and can speak to a little bit more. But Crypto the Game is very interesting, where
yeah,
they combine this sort of reality TV show experience and bring aspects of that on chain, whether it's voting, whether it's actually the ability to rejoin the game if you've been voted off,
mhm,
because um, the qualifications to play are actually based on holding an NFT. So a new entrant can join. Someone that gets voted off can actually purchase another player NFT and continue playing or participating in the game. So that's pretty interesting and sort of adjacent to that general concept of what
yeah,
can be done in a complementary way that has guerrilla-like aspects, but also that on-chain aspect too. And lastly, off of the top of my head, I would say what's going on in the Farcaster ecosystem. You're
okay,
starting to see very interesting ways where Farcaster frames are being applied, which is
yeah,
effectively a interactive content unit that can do a lot of different things, whether it's within the Farcaster feed to actually on-chain actions to engaging or digesting content within the larger post unit. So one example that I recently saw is that you could probably, and I don't think it's really been done quite yet in the way that I saw it being described, but you could actually insert ads into a Farcaster frame. And what does that look
interesting.
like if you actually have that in a personalized, targeted, or dynamic way?
Yeah,
And I wouldn't call that guerrilla per se, but I think the point here is that there is this very broad play space or opportunity and area where there can be on-chain growth mechanics, whether it's spur of the moment, something
mm,
pretty ridiculous and only can be a flash in the pan type of moment, like what Redao did it,
yeah,
and they did it very creatively, in a very responsive way, just due to the
yeah,
time sensitivity of the situation, or it could be a little less time sensitive and can turn into more of a strategy or something that could be applied more broadly, like what I
mhm.
described with Farcaster frames.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also hope that we get to see more on-chain guerrilla marketing strategies being applied, or primarily also hope that you be able to actually cover more of these case studies, because technically one of the first places I try to go to when I need more resources is your newsletter. So reading that, I was like, this has to be a question I asked Tipan. Um, talking about your newsletter, personally, I believe, and I'm very sure many other people must have told you what I'm going to say, that the way you document marketing activities, marketing events, marketing strategies in Web3 is without any doubt impressive. It's amazing, and your Substack has grown up to be one of the most exciting resources in marketing out there. I've personally tried to do a Substack before, and I know how daunting it can be. to be able to sustain it to where we are right now. That's a lot of new newsletters you've actually published. What has it been like building your Substack to where it currently is right now? What's been the experience?
Yeah, definitely. And very kind words. I appreciate it, Prime. Yeah, I could share a little bit about the background of that
Yeah.
Substack. So it started a little over 2 years ago. I actually, at the time, went on sabbatical from my previous sort of chapter in my
Yeah.
career, as I started to really lean into the Web3 and crypto space, particularly from understanding all the activity going on and realizing that there's something more here than just necessarily, hey, crypto is about money and price go up,
Mm.
hopefully, and like hopefully, buying. And at the time, the big thing that got me into the space was NFTs, and NBA Top Shot in particular
Yeah.
really entered there in January 2021. And it took me about a year and a half, maybe a little less than that, to really understand the space more for what it was, all the exciting things, all the interesting things, all the challenges that it
Mm.
really had maybe upcoming in terms of growth and adoption. And just using the product and joining different communities and being on Twitter a lot more, which I
Mm.
never really was in the prior to joining this industry and space. And I realized a combination of a few things. One, that I wanted to write, and I've wanted to write for a long time. So,
Yeah.
fun fact, I've actually been journaling. So just like a personal journal, not even, typing online or anything,
Yeah.
but journaling personally and, with pen or pencil and paper, since
Mm-hmm.
I was about 6 years old. So
Interesting.
writing as a habit was something that was just natural to me, and I did consistently and still do today. Um, as a way to just reflect and write about different topics on the personal life. um so I wanted to explore what it looked like to just write more publicly, but I
Yeah.
didn't know what I wanted to write about. So then the second piece was my background, is that I've had about a decade's worth of growth and marketing experience working at. I'm based in the Bay Area in California, so have worked at large companies in
Yeah.
growth and marketing related roles, and worked in smaller startups in growth
Yeah.
and marketing related roles. And I realized, okay, there's something that can be of value, not just to myself, but to other people, writing about, that type of angle in a slightly more professional way. And then the
Mm.
last piece, which was me joining this industry and really spending all this time and effort, all my, what I like to say is all my non-sleeping and all my non-working hours were just, in this industry, like looking at
Yeah.
OpenSea, Discord, Twitter, Telegram, etc.
Yeah.
Um, and I realized that there's potentially an opportunity, and effectively it was me creating a hypothesis about, okay, I enjoy writing, I want to do that more publicly, I don't know what to write about. um, However, I realized that I'm very, very interested, more than a hobby, probably more than a passion, in this Web3 space, and also that there is an opportunity for this angle, leveraging my background in marketing and growth. So that's sort of how the blog started. Really combining all those three together and realizing there might be an opportunity to write about this and share these insights and observations and hopefully lessons to an
Mm.
audience that might find this valuable and interesting. So that started a little over 2 years ago. Yesterday, I published number 302. So I've written
Yep.
about over 300 pieces in just about 2 years.
Whoa.
I used to write 5 times a week, so every weekday, when I was on sabbatical at that time when I kicked this off. And now I'm writing twice a week. So a lot busier than I was when I was on sabbatical, but definitely a habit that has stuck with me. And I hopefully will continue to do as long as possible, because I really do treat it as what I like to view as a form of a public good, as well
Yeah.
as something that I enjoy and am generally passionate about. That said, not easy to do that
Yeah.
very regularly, and I have to be
Mm.
thoughtful about how to push that out. So, for all the content creators out there, I think we all recognize each other in terms of the effort that it takes. Even
Yeah.
you recording this podcast, right? It's not like you just click a few buttons and it's done.
And
You spend this time to edit it, all
yeah.
that fun stuff. But it is very rewarding with what comes after,
Yeah.
with consistency, with quality, and with other efforts to really grow that audience and
Yeah.
community. So, with what I'm doing now, it's been really great to be able to connect with people all over the world in all different
Mhm.
corners of this industry. And the goal, again, is to provide insights that I don't believe are really found much anywhere else in the space. And that's what gives me a lot of fulfillment, but also a
Yeah.
lot of, other interesting opportunities to have conversations with other folks in the space.
Yeah. Brilliant. If you've not read T-Pan's newsletter, if you're going to read it immediately after this episode, I think the most recent one is the one on Iggy Azalea's mother. Brilliant.
Yeah, and
Brilliant.
what I'll say with that is like, what's interesting is people come to the newsletter to, there might be a particular topic or a
Yeah.
particular, thing I might write about, or someone might refer them to read the
Yeah.
newsletter. And, it might be really interesting. People might really like that topic, but
Yeah.
then maybe the next 2 or 3 might be like, oh, I don't even know what this is. Like, oh, this is
Yeah.
weird. Like, oh, I read someone else's opinion about this topic and like they say it's bad, right? And Iggy Azalea is
Mm.
actually a really good example where
Yeah. Brilliant.
there's been a fair amount of controversy about celebrity meme
Celeb
coins.
tokens. Yeah.
And like, are they good? Are they bad? Well, if you made a lot of money, they're automatically good. Or like, it's not good for the ecosystem if all these celebrities like join and do this thing and like, they make maybe 6 figures or 7 figures and then they just
Yeah.
leave, right? And we saw that with
Yeah.
the NFTs. But for me, the angle is about, is there anything we could learn about this? I'm
Mm.
not claiming that Iggy Azalea is not like the others, but what I can say is that she is probably, from what I could tell, doing something more interesting than the others
Yeah.
so far. And maybe we could lean a little bit more in to understand what she's doing, how she's approaching it. Is there
Mhm.
anything we could learn, especially if you're a founder or operator, or just someone that's
Mm.
trying to understand the industry and all the crazy things going on? And
Yeah.
can that be applied from a growth or marketing perspective, or
Yeah.
just understanding like, is there something else? And if this continues on, who else is joining, and how do we evaluate what's good, what's bad,
Mhm.
as subjective as that might be? So
Yeah.
that's sort of my take. And sometimes it's like not something you necessarily are the most interested in or always agree with. And I
Mm.
don't want to focus or only write about things that are just popular,
Yeah.
right?
True.
The newsletter
True.
is somewhat opinionated, and also
Yeah.
opinionated hopefully in a way that's, hey, you form your own ultimate opinions about it, but in a way
Yeah.
that brings to light some topics that an average, let's say, growth in Web3 newsletter might
Yeah.
not bring up, because I believe that there's still a lot of interesting things to learn and
Yeah.
observe from all the chaos,
Yeah. Definitely.
and
Yes.
good and bad in the industry.
Yeah. What I think she's doing, which I kind of assume more like a growth hack strategy, is she bonds mother tokens or mother coins when every celeb or any other celeb actually dumps
Mm-hmm.
their tokens. That's
Mm-hmm.
incredible. I mean, it literally flips the narrative. It gives them more visibility. It tends to, you understand how it feels when tokens are being bought. It increases the value. It creates this psychological understanding that
Mm-hmm.
more likely mother is getting more value. And I think it's just brilliant, to be honest. I think it's brilliant, and definitely there's a lot to learn. There's a whole lot to learn. Please check out newsletter, definitely. If you've not read Web3 with T-Pan, it's a place to be, without any doubt. How do you come up with the memes for your newsletter, bro?
Yeah, I slowed down on that a little more. And
Yeah,
sometimes it's just like
you
based on
slow
my
down.
energy. I mean, I make them, they're definitely sometimes just based on my mood, based on my energy, based on the topic, based on sometimes the spontaneous creative energy that I have while writing the piece. And
Yeah.
it just comes to me. It's like a muse, and also just what I see online, right? And it's
Yeah.
really fun. And also that goes hand in hand with the charts and the visuals. It's nothing
Yeah.
fancy. I don't try to make it fancy. And it's intentional actually, because I
It
think
resonates.
now that there's so much content that can be created in a more automated way, and
Yeah.
through a there's nothing wrong with that, to be very clear. I
Yeah.
use AI in different ways myself, definitely not very, very little, at least for now, for the newsletter, just because I sort of have my own separate process. But that really
Yeah.
allows me to really think through the creative aspect of it beyond the words, right? The visuals
Mm-hmm.
a little more
Mm-hmm.
deeply. Um, so yeah, with the memes, I think it really is a function of the consumption of the
Yeah.
different sources of information and content that I
Yeah.
have, and also somewhat, reflective of the space where um, it's honestly, depending on where you get your information from or your news,
Mm-hmm.
that there is more of a lightness to it
Yeah.
in crypto and Web3 compared to, let's say, traditional finance, or
Yeah.
even growth and marketing in sort of the Web2 space or
Mm-hmm.
outside of Web3. And it doesn't mean that it's better or worse, but I think my sense of humor and my
Yeah.
approach to creating content reflects this space a little bit more culturally,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also just
Definitely.
to lighten up the mood a little bit more. So, one thing I do with my blog, and because it's a personal blog, right, I make sure that it's in my voice, it's in my
Yeah.
style, I write it, that it actually, having these memes in different parts of the newsletter or in different sections of what I'm writing about actually
Mm.
helps to break up some of the complexity and some of the heaviness of the topics I talk about,
Yeah.
right? So if I'm talking about, let's say, breaking down different growth levers from this project or this Web3 game, that's a pretty heavy topic, right?
Yeah.
That's complex. Sometimes that's boring for some people. How can I
Yeah.
lighten it up, right? And
Mm-hmm.
even if, and for someone that's a newer reader, if you don't know me, how can I just sort of be like, hi, I'm a human, I'm just someone that's in this space. I'm not necessarily better than you, I'm not smarter than you, I'm not more qualified than you. I'm just someone else that's also exploring the space and
Yeah.
really finds a lot of things interesting. So by using humor, that sort of just humanizes the person, me, behind the authorship, behind the newsletter,
Yeah.
and that I'm just having fun too, participating in
Mm-hmm.
the ecosystem and hopefully contributing just like those people are as well, or if they want to eventually, hopefully
Yeah.
they will too. So the memes are just a fun part, and it's always something that just comes to me, and hopefully that energy continues as the newsletter continues on.
Yeah. I look forward to the energy continuing. I mean, when I opened the last newsletter, and then I saw the meme, it was like, I'm tired, Tip, and I was like, yeah, really.
well, yeah, because and that's fun, right? Because I like to, and this comes a lot from stand-up comedy, so I love stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
I'm going to a show. Oh no, not this week. Next weekend, like me
Yeah.
and my wife, we go, like, we are averaging like once a month, which is great, and we love
Yeah.
watching it, online and everything. But I think, in that case, with what you're referencing, it's almost like I give a voice to the audience, and in
Yes,
that case, like,
exactly.
I'm tired, T-Pan. And it's because I've been writing a lot more about meme coins over the
Meme
past few
coins.
months, right?
Yeah.
Because it is a really big topic. A lot of people are interested in it. And also, I know that some of my audience probably are just like, this is not interesting to me. And I want to learn or read about something else. And I'm like,
Yeah.
sorry, so it's also recognizing, like, hey, I'm not writing about everything in the space, because I'm not
Yeah.
focused on, like, hey, here's 20 links and you
Mm-hmm.
go read about it yourself. I'm trying to go deeper about a particular
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah.
And it's just recognizing that, hey, people have different opinions and want to
Definitely.
read different things, and also just poking at myself and making sure that this is a little light, but also there can be serious insights and interesting insights that you could learn from
Mm-hmm.
it. So makes it
Yeah.
fun for me, and hopefully makes it fun for the readers and community
Yeah.
too.
At least it makes it fun for me. I have to be honest.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it. You enjoy it. So that's great.
Yeah, that's been definitely. Moving forward, I read one of your tweets, or your thread. You're talking about people who enter Web3 space through easy to understand use cases tend to stay within that lane. What are your thoughts, or what are the onboarding strategies Web3 projects can actually use to attract and retain broader, more diverse user base?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really interesting because, especially over the past few years, there's just so much more going on in this space. And what I always
Yeah.
like to tell people, especially if they're not familiar with everything going on in this industry,
Mm.
really just start with what interests you, right? Like, oh, I like I like sports, or I
Mm.
like music, or I am a music artist, or I'm a
Mm.
digital artist, or I like gaming and video
Mm.
games. Well, there's a whole space for you, right? There's a ton of
Exactly.
projects. And what used to be maybe only a couple things a few years ago is now there's dozens, probably, especially a space like Web3 gaming. There's hundreds
Mm.
of different Web3 games and
Yeah.
networks and ecosystems and projects going on
Yeah.
there. And I think in terms of those easy to understand use cases, that's what I mean, right?
Mm.
If you're interested in gaming, like, don't start off with DeFi or don't jump into that. Like, play the games, like, see what's going on
Yeah.
there, like, meet other people in the ecosystem that have those same interests with you. And also that goes the same with, obviously, those projects who are looking to onboard those types of users. And that's a requirement for them in terms of onboarding, marketing, growth, and all that fun stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that there is that balance or understanding. Okay, well, let's continue down the example Web3 gaming. How expansive or how deep is the on-chain aspects or mechanics of that game? Does a
Yeah.
user have to have a wallet in order for them to even play the game and onboard
Mm-hmm.
onto the game, or even play it at all? Well, if
Yeah.
that's the case, you probably need to start with an on-chain or crypto or Web3 native audience, right? People who
Yeah.
already have wallets or understand that very easily, and those
Yeah.
types of mechanics, how to sign transactions or whatever that is, especially, with a browser wallet, mobile wallet, whatever it might be, right? And in terms of going broader in that regard, well, it's also understanding the product and what those potential on-ramps are to make that more possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you start with let's say you're a Web3 game, you have 10,000, let's say, weekly or monthly active users, great.
Mm-hmm.
But then you need to expand that 10x in the next year because that's part of your growth goals. Well, if you need to expand beyond your native, your crypto Web3 native audience, okay, what are the ways to make that simpler? Do you have the ability currently to make that simpler? In terms of onboarding, do you have to have a wallet in that sort of first time
Yeah.
user experience? Do you have to start having transactions or owning an NFT, within the first hour of gameplay, or could that be much later in the game? And
Mm-hmm.
if and when that happens, what are the resources? How do you bring that player or that community member on board to do that, right? A
Mm.
lot of
Yeah.
thinking that needs to be done. And I know a lot of games or different participants or projects in the ecosystem have put a lot of thought and effort into figuring out what that looks
Yeah.
like. So I think
Yeah.
everyone's leveling up and getting better at that. And it's really
Mm-hmm.
taking a step back and going to first principles. Like, what does that onboarding experience look like if you want to grow? And where does crypto come in, or where does a wallet or a token come in and not? And also just the users themselves, what are their motivations, right? Am I here to
Mm.
play a game, or am I here to play a game and maybe get a token at some point later on, or maybe soon? Or am I here just to get the token, right?
Yeah.
And with
Yeah.
that, then you need to change the approach of like, okay, if they're just here to get the token, is there a chance, and how high is that chance that we could get them to actually enjoy the game, right? And
Yeah.
maybe so over time lower those incentives and just
Mm.
genuinely play a game that they view as really fun.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say on that front is, again, every project, every vertical within this industry obviously is going to take a different approach. But in terms of growing the whole space and the broader space, there is the saying of death by a thousand cuts, right? If it's a
Yeah.
company that goes up in flames or goes bankrupt, it might be generally due to one larger event, but it's usually also a lot of things that happen that lead up to that
Yeah.
event, right? So that's sort of
Definitely.
death by a
Definitely.
thousand cuts. Or why does a community sort of fade away? Well, probably death by a thousand cuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or some version of that. Well, in terms of growing this industry, it's actually the opposite, which is really fun. It's onboarding from a thousand ramps, right? And that
Yeah.
goes back to what I initially said, which is, hey, are you interested in music? You're interested in cooking. You're interested in gaming. You're interested in collectibles. Well, there's something there for you. And for each person, they have a different potential way to on ramp, right? So
Yeah.
it's really exciting to see that there's literally and probably more than 1,000 ways to on ramp into this ecosystem. You just need to find that for yourself, and
Mhm.
hopefully there's an opportunity beyond the, hey, I'm just, I just want to make a lot of money. And hey, if that's the case, you want to trade crypto, there's been that on ramp
Yeah,
for a while now too, and
for a
that's
whole
great
long
if that's
time.
your thing. Yeah.
Definitely. While you were talking, I wrote down the analogy you used with the death by 1,000 cuts, then also onboarding by 1,000 ramps. I mean, it makes a ton of sense. Um, I'm pretty much active with Solana, and the super teams on Solana, and there's such an exciting way they onboard people, developers, talent writers, and you just find it, you just kind of find it very interesting. And I work with quite a number of games as well, and in my opinion, I think if games are going to onboard people to actually play the games, abstracting the entire need for having a wallet is one of the best things you want to do. I played Heroes of Mavia. I'm not sure if you've played a game.
I have. Yep. I played.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I downloaded it on my phone, and I opened the account and I created it, and I did not pass through any wallet creation process, and it was very seamless, and I loved it, and I still play it. I think if we can have more of that kind of experience, we can at least smoothen the onboarding process, the reduce the friction of on ramping them. That don't make a lot of sense. I mean, I really think it's gonna make a lot of sense. Also for games, not everybody comes to Web3 gaming to play games. I mean, many people come for the token, which is okay.
Hmm.
And many people come for this. There's a ton of industry around Web3 gaming. There's the content creation aspect of things, there's the KO aspect of things, there's the actual
Hmm.
gaming, and it's a whole lot. I mean, when you look at it, people are just there for different reasons, and those reasons could actually become the 1,000 cuts that you mentioned. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even in just Web3 gaming,
Yeah,
there's probably there's definitely hundreds, probably
100. Yeah,
approaching 1,000 different, games across all the blockchains and things like
yeah,
that. So hey, you have 1,000 Web3 gaming ramps in terms of all the different Web3 games out there. So
yeah.
no shortage of that. Just got to make sure the games are fun and the quality is there, and just continuing to be creative about the approach to bring people on board.
Mm,
And it's slowly and surely, we'll grow the sort of ecosystem and sort of all the different types of folks that are just engaging and interacting on the blockchain or playing Web3 games and all the other
mm,
different sort of apps out there, sometimes without even knowing it. And that's okay too.
yeah. One of my next questions now is, let's see the part where on-ramping is quite good, but there's a ton of challenges marketers actually face in Web3. I read you and Emily's engagement on X, and where she was talking about the importance of understanding the nuances of crypto culture for effective marketing. Um, could you talk a bit more about that? Really?
First of all, I think in terms of growth and marketing, and this goes for pretty much any other, generally in any industry, any role, right?
Yeah.
It's not just growth and marketing in general, but you generally should have a broad range of skill sets, or at least to a degree of understanding that broad range of skill sets. So that's at least in marketing, there's a concept of T-shaped marketer. So if you're doing marketing, you might be
Yeah.
an expert in, let's say, SEO, but then there's also like paid marketing, there's content, there's
Mhm,
analytics,
mhm,
there's whatever it might be. um and that holds, obviously that holds true in Web 2 or just in other industries. But with Web 3, what's really interesting is that it's not necessarily a requirement, but it really does help to elevate all the other aspects. There is this element of this bigger weighted aspect of
yeah.
understanding the culture of this space. And if you understand it well, it actually helps to elevate the other aspects of that T and the skill sets across that
Mm,
T, so to say,
brilliant.
right?
Yeah.
And if you combine those, it really becomes more of a multiplier as opposed to just one separate aspect of the T. So if I were
Mm,
to sort of if I were sort of to flip the T on its head, right, you actually have another foundational layer that helps to
Yeah.
elevate all those different areas, whether it's analytics, whether it's sort of content, SEO,
Yeah.
social, paid, or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
And understand that culture helps to elevate it. So that really adds a different aspect of that recipe for like, what
Mm.
does it look like to be good at marketing or growth within the space? And
Yeah.
obviously another aspect is just speed, right? Like whether it's like speed to respond to a trend, just like
Mm-hmm.
what we discussed with Redow, right? It was very time
Definitely.
sensitive, and they had to not only be creative, but like pull that out, and also a little bit of luck, right? People had to have
Mm.
caught that,
Yeah.
right place, right time. But the speed of doing this and iterating and continuing to reinvent whatever that playbook looks like
Mm-hmm.
is of paramount importance, because this space moves so fast. A lot of people who participate in this ecosystem just jump around, right?
Mm.
Because there are sometimes incentives to do so, to
Mm.
jump around and be the first to something. You get the outsized potential
Yeah.
returns,
Yeah.
whatever that might look like. And from a
Yeah.
business standpoint, the same applies,
Yeah.
right? The first to hop onto a trend, the first to experiment with a new
Mm.
feature or aspect, whether it's released on a blockchain, whether
Yeah.
it's, you know, doing something that hasn't been done before. That's very true even outside, obviously, of Web3 and crypto. You know, and tying that to growth in general, a very simple example of this is, let's say, I'm trying to think, let's say, uh making this up. I know Discord does this in very specific ways, but let's say Discord was like, hey, we're launching ads, right? Like
Yeah.
any advertiser could just buy or like sponsor a Discord server, or like every 100 messages, like ads will pop up onto a
Mm-hmm.
user's you know, chat, and they'll see that every 100 messages or something, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the smartest and the most growth-minded marketers will actually start experimenting, right? And if there's a
Yeah.
budget needed, or they'll play around with what that could look like,
Test it.
how they could do partnerships through that. Yeah, they'll test it, right? So
Yeah.
imagine that times like 10, where that happens in Web3 and crypto, where there's just so many more dynamic ways to experiment and test. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
speed is the name of the game, because if you're the first, you're probably going to get outsized returns, whether you're trying to get more
Yeah.
users or players or wallets or whatever it might be. And it's
Mm-hmm.
that constant reinvention. And there's often a lot of, to a degree, copy paste or just sort of inspiration across the space, which is
Mm-hmm.
amazing, but also understanding that that incremental value for each person that runs that playbook again decreases over time. It doesn't mean that you should just avoid it if other
Mm.
people have, you know, a lot of people have followed that same playbook or strategy or tactic, but just understanding that the highest returns come from experimenting on the newest or the newer things, or adding a feature or remixing something that hasn't been done in that way before. So that's not brand new to someone in the growth space or generally even the marketing space, but it happens in an accelerated pace here.
I mean, that's brilliant. I mean, you said something that really stuck out. The highest returns comes from reinventing the newest things. Brilliant. I think the analogy with Discord is interesting. The growth minded folks will definitely test it out. I mean, and we kind of see it back to Web3 games. We pretty much see how there's now this node sale thingy going on right now, and lots of brands are testing with node sale strategies. And then prior to node sales, there was the airdrop, the free collections, whatnot, and it was a meta, and we call it meta generally speaking.
Yep.
And so we see now there's the node meta, there's the airdrop meta, and we tend to
Yep.
see how in each of these meta, people just tend to come up with new ways and new ways and new ways of doing it. And there was a point where KOs and content creators were a big thing. They're still a big thing. And it's pretty much exciting. The nuances change very quickly.
Yep.
I have to
Yep.
be honest. And it's one of the reasons why I love reading your newsletter, because I'm like, what's the newest thing happening right now? Because I'm not sure if I'm still as up to date as I thought I was, because something new happens every minute, and it's something that I believe many Web3 marketers will we find daunting very early on in their career. But I think over time, if they find new resources, good resources, and they can at least stay updated on what's really going on in space. Now, this question is something that I knew I had to ask you. Since since I've been following you, you've had a crypto card or a cool card.
A cool cat.
Yeah,
Yep.
cool card. A cool card on your Twitter PFP. So I think when I started doing research on the question, then I paid attention to other small collection. You kind of made it small on your banner. I never noticed that before. And I'm like, what are these? And I opened it up and I saw there's another cool card in there. I think you have a OCM there. There's a doodle, I guess. And I'm like, what? Why cool card? Because the doodle looks very amazing, to be honest, and the OCM is also very brilliant. But why have you kept the cool cards on your banner or on your profile picture for that long? I mean, it's literally you see that particular cool card with that particular angle. That's T-Pan. But why have you kept it for that long?
Yep. Yeah. So in terms of the breaking down the question, so in terms of the PFP and why I've kept it the same thing, is just more for the brand, and like it's a very easy way to just have a logo for the newsletter. Could I do something else with it or like create a proper Web3 with T-Pan logo? Totally. But just having with the PFP, having that set as the Twitter profile picture, and elsewhere online or on chain, just using that where appropriate and relevant, that's a little easier for consistency. So it's just sort of fun, right? It's paying homage to the space in terms of that where online community, it's now become a part of myself in terms of representation. Can that change in the future? Definitely. Will it? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not married to it, but I think it's just been nice to have that and not really have to worry like, oh, like, should I change it or whatever. Fun fact, I actually had the cool cat as my profile picture on LinkedIn, but then LinkedIn took it down because I think someone probably reported it and said that I was violating some terms, and I got some notification from LinkedIn saying that I was, and I was like, what the heck? And definitely have seen other people who still have their NFT or like a NFT as their profile picture. But it is what it is. So on LinkedIn, it's an actual picture of me, and that's fine. I'm doxxed and everything, but I just found that amusing. So why cool cats? So for me personally, in my experience entering this space and starting to really dive into it more, cool cats was the first NFT community, or even just on-chain community, so to say, that helped me realize how important community was. And my background has, from the growth and marketing side, even though I've done stuff across all aspects of that sort of T-shaped marketer model we were talking about earlier, I primarily came from acquisition, more specifically paid acquisition. It was that sort of foundation in that T-shaped marketer. So I didn't really do like brand or like community stuff until much later in my career. And I think it took me a little longer than probably most other people to really understand what the heck community meant as like from a personal standpoint, right? Not just a professional standpoint. So Cool Cats was the first NFT community where I was like, oh, wow, these people are like not just online usernames that were just chatting with each other just because like price goes up or something, or because of some other reason, but they really were friends and they really celebrated, supported each other, just had a good time together. So it was with Cool Cats where I first realized that, and that's why I chose that. Are there, more strategically better PFPs? Like I have a Pudgy Penguin, I could be rocking that. I will admit, and I can tell you that I thought about changing that multiple times because I think I'm a huge fan of Pudgy Penguins. Luca, his team, everyone, they're killing it. I think there's so much to learn from there. I've written about them so many times.
I've read
just because they deserve it. Yeah. And it was one of those things where I realized I have a fun thing where when I think about my writing and I reflect upon it, if I write about something multiple times, it's a signal to myself, not to you guys, but to myself that like, wait a second, I should probably, if I don't already have some exposure to it, I should probably, purchase a pudgy penguin or, maybe a little pudgy or just get involved a little bit more
Yeah.
in their ecosystem. So that's sort of how I ended up in that community, because I was just writing about them without, having any. And I
Yeah.
realized like, that's a sign they're doing a lot of interesting stuff that most others
Yeah.
aren't at that time. So yeah, it's because they just giving a nod to them that like they helped me understand what, several years ago, especially when NFTs were the hottest thing in town, like community, like that's what helped me realize it was actually being a part of Pudgy Cool Cats, and then joining other communities too, understanding that better. And now
Exactly.
community is still super important,
Oh yes.
but there's a lot of different ways now, or it's a much richer there's a much richer set of tools, approaches, strategies, tactics to grow a community, because it's so easy to start one. The hardest part is growing it in a sustainable way and retaining the community now, because there's just so many things and so many places for a person or a wallet to be.
Yeah, definitely. I think the retaining part is very key as well. You can grow it, it can scale up as fast as possible, but retaining it and actually maintaining that culture around the community and that relevance within the community, or what the relevance of the community to the people. I think that's a lot of work. It's a whole lot of work.
Yes,
It's a whole lot of work. Yeah.
absolutely.
I believe that there's really no surefire way, or there's really no set in stone way on how to scale growth in Web3. If we are being honest,
Yep.
we know that the playbook might work for brand A, it definitely will backfire in brand B, because the market tends to respond to things differently. But I think it's always important to test. And like you rightly mentioned, we test with the Discord analogy and optimize campaign. But looking at Web3 currently and looking at all of the trends that are happening with Farcaster and gaming and DeFi and L1s, L2s, side chains, hyper chains,
Yep.
what are your thoughts on the current marketing trends right now in Web3? Literally, your thoughts on it.
Yeah, totally. I think high level, just because I'm going to speak from a pretty high level perspective. It's really obviously dependent on the vertical. Are you a marketplace? Are you an ecosystem or chain or network? Are you a game? Are you a consumer focused product? Are you is it decentralized social? Blah blah blah. There's just so many different ways to go about it. But I think in terms of general trends, one, and so these will sound more obvious, but one is definitely questing and point systems, right? Because points suggest that there might be a token related. But I think what's interesting is seeing all the different variations of how those systems look like, how they work, how points might be distributed or defined. A simple example of that last point that I just mentioned, like points and how they might be distributed or defined, is with the Blast ecosystem, which is like Ethereum layer 2. They have sort of a multi-tiered system, and that reminds me of gaming, right? Where there's like different types of resources or like currencies within that game, right? So you have like coins, you might have diamonds, and then you might have like the premium version of diamonds where you can only pay for. So now point systems are actually becoming multi-tiered again with Blast. They have the concept of points, right? And then they also have gold, which equates to points, but gold is actually acquired from a very different method than just having points accumulate as a user or a wallet or a person, using the blockchain or interacting with the different apps on the blockchain, right? So I think that's what's going to continue, because it's the easiest way to sort of, it's something familiar, right? Just like make points number go up, and like that generally means like it'll eventually points will convert into something. But what's really interesting here is just all the different flavors of how that sort of looks, and questing around that. So gaming's doing a lot of interesting stuff on that front too. So another marketing trend that's interesting, especially on the social side, and this has been talked in certain circles as well, is the concept of an intern, right? So interns are on the social media
Yeah.
side of things they're oftentimes they aren't literally an intern. I think maybe like 10 years ago, the people who managed social channels were probably interns because, social was a lot smaller than it is
Mm-hmm.
today.
Mm-hmm.
But interns basically are the people or the team that manage these social channels for
Yeah.
a product, project, brand, or whatever, and regarded more so in Web3 or crypto. But that concept of intern creates a different type of persona for that respective account, right? And that sort of gives them the space where even if it's in a brand account, that intern personality is able to sort of add this sense of humor to the content they might be putting out.
Yeah.
Additionally, there are definitely a good number of projects or brands now that have an intern account associated
Mm-hmm.
with that brand itself. So, as an example, Polymarket is a prediction market. They've gotten really popular. They actually recently announced that they raised $74.5 million,
Yeah.
which is huge.
Yeah.
Um, they've recently part of their social strategy, and they just embraced it because I think the team has that personality, so they're able to lean into it more. They basically have a Polymarket intern who's like a separate account, but basically has claimed to be the Polymarket intern on the social
Mm-hmm.
side. And so they play around with each other and interact with each other in a way that is possible because of that type of persona and the characters that they sort of built around the brand account, but also the people who help manage or work as a part of the team
Yeah.
on behalf of the brand account. So I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of interesting things that could be done there. And there could be more, right? So
Yeah.
whether it's like an intern account, what happens, and this probably should only be for like larger accounts, but could be experienced in different ways. Okay, so like the intern is typically associated with like the social media role from the brand account. Then what if there's an
Yeah.
engineering or product or other types of accounts? Like what could that look like? I'm not saying it should be done, but I haven't really seen it done in this space.
Mm-hmm.
But that could be very interesting, right? So what
Yeah.
happens if an intern interacts with making this up completely, but like Coinbase engineering intern, right? Or the
Mm-hmm.
Coinbase product intern or something like
Yeah.
that. That could be very interesting because that turns into a show in itself. So that's pretty interesting.
It is a show. Yeah.
Um, or just some sort of campaign or initiative to for one-off engagement or people to
Yeah.
remark at how interesting that is.
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing is, again, I'll point back to Farcaster because the ecosystem they're building enables for a lot more creative features to be built on because it's not on something like X or
Mm-hmm.
Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. But I think there's going to be a lot more composability and sort of features that can be created that allow for marketing to flex some breadth in terms of what can be done. And again, like
Yeah.
what I mentioned, frames are really interesting because they sort of are a blank canvas within the typical content unit, so to say,
Mm-hmm.
that allows for more things that could be done. So
Yeah.
I'm in a different group of like growth folks called Safari. And within that, there's a subgroup of folks that focus more on Farcaster called Far
Mm.
Hackers. And they actually used the Farcaster Frames unit, content unit, to promote this sort of Far Hackers growth book, right?
Yeah.
Which
I saw that. Yeah.
covered a lot of different case studies. So that's only possible, or like that was part of their distribution strategy where they put that into a Farcaster frame. So
Yeah.
that wouldn't be possible in that way on, let's say, Twitter or X, right? That would
Yeah.
the
Sure.
standard way of doing that would typically be, oh, reply in our DMs or like reply to this
Mm-hmm.
post and we'll send you a link. In this case, it's more like, hey, read the thing within the Farcaster frame or like mint it, and then you can read the piece. And you could
Mm-hmm.
all do that, or at least parts of it, because it was definitely like a very early stage idea. So it wasn't like the perfect flow, but you could do that within the frame now, right? So that completely changes what sort of distribution could look like. So I think there's going to be more and more apps that create a more dynamic range of interactivity, and that allows for more creative approaches. Going back to the very first question, on-chain guerrilla marketing, that
Yeah.
allows for that to happen. So I think we're going to see a much more of an evolution on that front.
Yeah. I think the Farcast idea is pretty much very interesting. I saw the playbook and I was like, this is incredible. I mean, I downloaded Farcaster and actually subscribed to Farcaster because of Safari's playbook, and I think it was just pretty much interesting. When we look at marketing and what we've seen over the past couple of years, when I was reading one of your old newsletters, I think it's way back, newsletter 183, when you're talking about limits breaks Super Bowl ad, and you talked about the strategy, particularly. I don't want to go too in depth, but you talked about the scan to min strategy. But when you look at the trends right now, we've seen since limit break, I don't think anybody has run a Super Bowl ad. I'm not sure.
Yep. Just coin. So. Well, yeah, that year it was only them, and then prior to that, it was a lot of exchanges. FTX, obviously now defunct. Coinbase, other companies too. But that was last year, so not like 5 months ago, but like a year and 5 months ago. So it was just limit break.
Limit break, yeah. So it's interesting, and when you look at the trends right now, what are the metrics that you think Web3 brands and Web3 growth marketers and Web3 teams should actually focus on when measuring the impact of their campaigns? Now, I know it might differ, but what are the general metrics here?
Yeah, totally. So, again, speaking very high level, I think it's very dependent on the product, the vertical, what their goals are at the end of the day too. Like, are you in growth mode? Are you focusing on product market fit? Are you, pre-product market fit, et cetera? What are the revenue streams? What's the business model, et cetera? But I think generally, and I'm just going to throw some high level metrics out there. So not trying to be too specific, because it really depends. But generally, a few different metrics that are generally spoken about, depending on the vertical, but active wallets, right, which signifies activity. And that said, it's, active wallets is a very, still quite a rough metric. It's better than saying like we have 1 million users. It's also better than saying like we have 1 million signups, right? Which generally just means emails that have signed up to whatever the product is. And active wallets is better, but what is that daily, weekly, monthly? Is that what is an active wallet defined as? Like they literally signed in. Did they actually make a transaction that had are they making that's just gas? Are they making a transaction that's with actual monetary value because they're purchasing something, or they're interacting with a DeFi protocol, etc. So there's a lot more digging into that piece, but generally some version of active wallets, depending on the product, is a metric that's very helpful, but digging in is even more important, right? TVL, that's more on the DeFi side, where it just shows like, hey, this protocol has effectively gathered this much capital, whether it's for staking, whether it's for liquidity or something. So that typically is a strong indicator of interest or involvement. And that said, TVL can even be and probably should to a degree, into like the diversity of the TVL, right? How many wallets, is it coming, is it multi-chain, how many chains, blah, 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 depending. So that's one, again, for more specific vertical. And like I mentioned, transaction volume is really interesting, particularly probably more on the marketplace side. Number of transactions, value of transactions, even geographically where, or categorically on the chain, which chain or network, etc. So those are probably a few of the higher level metrics that people look at, but the devil is really in the details, because, and again, this is coming from someone that has more of a growth background. So if you want a big number, I could give you a big number, right? If you want a very high quality number, like I could give you that too, but it's not going to be as nice looking as the big number. So it
It's a
really
big
just
number. Yeah.
it depends on like, okay, where do you see value? What is a good user? What does a good user look like? What does a good user do with your product? Do they just sign in a whole bunch? Are they just staring at are they just in app all the time, or are they, let's say, purchasing a whole bunch of NFTs, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's probably a valuable user, quote unquote, or wallet, because that
Yeah.
means you probably get a percentage of revenues
Mm-hmm.
from a royalty from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a marketplace. So lots of different interesting things to look at there, and it really is dependent on the product, the vertical, and all those other fun things. And it really, again, taking a step back from that, really understanding what types of metrics actually drive growth, right? Because
Yeah.
again, it's not just, okay, well, if you want a big number, I could give it to you, but then what does that look like in a sustainable way too? So I think that's what everyone's trying to figure out, knowing that, hey, there's a lot of things that you can do to get a spike in activity or spike in transaction volume or even a
Yeah.
spike in TVL or something. But how do you
Mm-hmm.
sustain that over time in an ever evolving and somewhat nebulous sort of industry where like that
Mm-hmm.
playbook's continuing to evolve and be written? You can never
Mm-hmm.
really rest on your laurels.
Definitely. Definitely. Brilliant. Brilliant. The most important thing you've mentioned here is that the devil is really in the details, and I think it's important. Um, it's important that we pay attention to that. I mean, if you're going to look at the measures or the metrics, how far do we want to take it into, and how detailed do you want to actually measure it, really matters a whole lot. And with your analogy of the guerrilla marketing makes a lot of sense as well. And to be honest, it's really interesting how much can be done with growth marketing, and how much result we can actually generate. And it's exciting that we're in the space, and we definitely more exciting things are going to be happening. And I definitely look forward to actually reading up more stories on Web3 with T-Pan in the coming days and coming weeks. And hopefully, let's see how far Mother Token goes. Who knows? Um,
We'll see. We'll see.
yeah,
Yeah, it's exciting times in the space. There's always something going on. Iggy Azalea
yeah,
is doing her thing.
yeah,
So it's been fun to be a part of that ride and just observe,
definitely,
because hopefully
definitely,
she sets a good example in terms of like what more can a celebrity do versus just rug pulls with
yeah,
NFTs and now even meme coins and celeb
yeah.
coins. So, hopefully she'd be a shining beacon and an example
I'm counting on it.
among others that come. But yeah, never a dull day, never a dull day,
Definitely,
never a dull week,
definitely,
never a dull month in this space. So
definitely.
um,
It's it's
cheers
it's
to
been
everyone.
It's been yeah, definitely. It's been. I'm really counting on that she does something interesting, and then pretty much it's been awesome actually having you on this episode. There going to be definitely going to be quite a number of people listening to you. What's your name on LinkedIn? How is the most easiest place to actually find you?
Yeah, so I think what's probably easiest, I mean, first of all, Substack is tpan.substack.com. On Twitter or X, I am tpan_web3.
Yeah,
LinkedIn, Thomas Pan. So my online name is just first initial last name. So feel free to
yeah,
find me on any of those channels and reach out if you have any questions or anything. Always open to chat.
amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for coming out on the episode today, T-Pan.
Definitely. Yeah, it was a pleasure being on here. Good just to
Yeah,
share what's going on my side.